Will you do us, so do you go by Gregory or Greg? Do you like Greg? Greg, okay.
Yeah, everything in writing you'll see will be Gregory. But
Okay,
personally,
you like Greg.
Greg.
And will you do us a favor and pronounce your last name? Did you, or did you get that? Okay,
I've got it if I don't forget it.
Is it Gillis?
Yeah, from Gillis.
Gillis, not Gee. Okay,
Yeah, it's a
Gillis. All right.
hyphenated name.
I haven't heard anything from Steve, but I'm assuming that he will not be here.
Okay. All right, well, let's get going. I will call the October 7th, 2022 EDA meeting to order. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to adopt the agenda as submitted.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I think that I should go first.
Do you have a proposal, Mr. Butler?
No, I don't.
Okay, all right.
Call the question.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Approval of the August 15th, 2022 EDA meeting minutes. Any discussion, or do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of the August 15th, 2022 meeting.
Yes. Thank you. So no discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4.0, Anoka County Regional Economic Development Report.
Thank you, Julie. Tonight, we have with us Gregory from Gillis. He's the new Economic Development Director for AC Red. Mr. Gillis assumed this post on August 1st, 2022. Greg's come to us with a breadth of experience. He's worked in the public sector as Director of Economic Development and Planning, in the private sector as a commercial real estate broker, and more recently as a small business owner, co-founder, working as the Director of Business Operations of Access Veterinary Care. Greg will brief the EDA on the current states of AC Red activities, review the county proposal for broadband improvements, and discuss our county grant application for internet services extensions. Greg, thank you for being here. We look forward to your presentation.
Welcome.
Thank you. I almost feel like I don't need to do any more introduction. That was much appreciated. Yeah, so my name is Gregory from Gillis. I go by Greg. And yeah, it's been, a very interesting and dynamic couple months. As you know, with Anoka County Regional Economic Development, just a little bit of history. There was a big economic development study done in 2017, and that really just highlighted both the fantastic opportunities within the county, but then also emphasized that the county really needs to be more of a player in economic development. The interesting thing about economic development is that it's all about setting the tone. It's creating a sense of place. It's really focused on, what do we have within our power on the public sector, and what can we create positive influence for in order to not be in competition. We don't want to be the developer. We don't want to be in competition with the private sector, but we're just trying to, set the table. What do we have? Can we do with zoning regulations, with land use planning, comprehensive plan, utility connections? How can we, better prepare ourselves so that when there's the right opportunity at the right time in the right spot, that we're in a good position to be able to take action. AC Red, as a result of that 2017 study, was kind of created in 2018. Jaquel Hader was, the initial person in that position. Sam Markman more recently. But while there's been, kind of a little bit of start and stop, especially with the pandemic, the three core focuses of AC Red has remained the same. Perception, readiness, and regionalism. So perception, through that 2017 study, highlighted the fact that there's a little bit of disconnect with the business community and with the real estate and development community on where exactly Anoka County is, what it fully encompasses, and so there's been a tremendous amount of effort and a lot of continued need just to make sure that there's that clear understanding that we are, we're a part of the 7 metro county area. There's a lot of diverse economic opportunities within Anoka County. Obviously, Columbia Heights, Fridley, those areas being fully built out and near the urban core are much different than East Bethel, Ham Lake, a number of communities as you continue further north. So the economic development opportunity is going to be different, but it's still, a lot of the connections, Highway 65, we're within, commuting distance. So just kind of working on the marketing and focus on that perception. The readiness aspect really can be looked at in a couple different ways. Certainly, site preparedness is a really big one. With the current, construction market, supply chain issues, labor shortages, especially in the construction industry, nothing kills a real estate and development deal faster than uncertainty. And so the more information that we're able to identify ahead of time, the better we're able to position key real estate assets and development assets for those, business growth opportunities. The better opportunity we're going to have to be able to secure that purchase agreement and have that development actually move forward. So a big priority of mine is going to be really working on that development readiness, trying to identify as much information as possible so that when, again, those right opportunity, right time, right place, that we're in that position to be able to jump. Regionalism is that third key focus, and that's getting, more thinking of how residents of the area, how they identify community. And that's kind of what it all comes back to is they don't, most people won't know exactly what side of the street that jurisdictional boundary is between which municipality. It's, I live here, I live in this area, I shop at these businesses, these are my neighbors. And so how do you identify that sense of community, and how do you capitalize on that regionalism, on opportunities for collaboration? How can we, work better together and really find opportunities to just build on that, efficiency and be more efficient with taxpayer dollars as a result. And so that, kind of plays back into the perception aspect a little bit and the readiness aspect, but really, how do we look at economic development from more of a regional perspective, and a little bit, 30,000 feet up, and see what can we do together in order to make a more dynamic area. So yeah, a couple months on the job, and so I definitely have a lot of great ideas that are in formulation, working with just amazing city staff. I had an opportunity to sit down with Jack and Stephanie a few weeks ago, and so there's been, just a lot of positive energy in order to, make Anoka County and make everybody's municipality as best that it could be. Any questions on that aspect before we chat a little bit about broadband?
Thank you for coming, Greg. I appreciate your delineating your role in the AC Red's office in these 3 different areas. Can you identify when the biggest challenge in each of these particular areas in perception, readiness, and regionalism? What is the biggest challenge in that particular area? And you may or may not have an idea or a plan on how to address that, but what do you see as the biggest challenge to each of those?
Yeah, I would say, so for perception, the big thing is that the real estate market, especially where we're at right now, so Twin Cities metropolitan area, and again, these are regional numbers. Q2 data end of June, there were 6 million square feet of industrial space that was under construction. Tenant demand right now is 18 million square feet on the industrial side of it. So there is just an obnoxious amount of demand that's out there. There's a lot of companies that are sitting on the sideline because construction prices are pretty high. And so they're kind of feeling things out, but you see a lot of investment on the main transportation corridors. You got 400,000 square feet going up in Ramsey, you got 450,000 square feet going up in, or in development proposal in Lionel Lakes. You got 300,000 in Blaine, right off of 35W. So from that perception aspect, how do we one, reach the, these are big investment companies. These aren't the local players that are making those decisions. They're pulling money nationally in order to be able to fund a lot of this spec industrial business space. So how do we position, that some of that investment to come up Highway 65? I know that there's developers in the metro that I've met with that have just not made the shift north yet. In their mind, they're saying, they're focused West Metro, and it's a safe investment. And so, I think right off of those main arteries of the interstates, Highway 10 being reconstructed, they're starting to loosen up a little bit on that. So how do we continue that momentum? And a lot of that is going to be relationship building. We're putting on the Upper Real Estate event next month. We'll be doing a business summit targeting, don't hold me to this, Q2 of '23. And so it's just going to be a lot of boots on the ground work. From the readiness perspective, investment. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money in order to figure that out. I think it's hugely important. I have some ideas on how we can help bridge that financing gap. I think that there's a few different opportunities, and it'll take participation on the private level if it's a privately owned piece of property. But going through that due diligence process, find the consultants. Can we try and get a number of projects going all at the same time and get some economies of scale for wetland delineation, for soil borings, rather than individual properties one at a time. Hey, can you give us a better price if we do 10 at a time? Kind of a thing. So a little bit of time there. Some of that's going to be, just the market and supply chain on the readiness side. It's got to work itself out. Industrial steel was at, for like metal buildings on the side of it, lead time was at 14 months. I think we're down to 7 months now. But still commanding, a high price. Industrial, like a new industrial building, if you want to put up a 5,000 square foot industrial building, you're looking probably with land and site and that kind of stuff, somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million for a 5,000 square foot metal building. Without, that's really expensive if you're a small business and just kind of, outgrew your 2,500 square feet and you just need a little bit more breathing room. Like taking out $1 million is, that's a lot. And so I think trying to see what we can do in order to put ourselves in a little bit better position. Can we get some of that pre-development stuff figured out? Then that doesn't get passed on to the end user. Shorten up that timeline, get them, if they do move forward, get them to a revenue generating space as quick as possible. Regionalism is going to be, me coming here and talking to you, finding out what are those key opportunities, listening to other municipalities, being able to talk with them, collaborations with the 7 chambers in the area. It's going to be a lot of listening, and then me being able to share as much information as possible with the policymakers, so that I can make a couple connections and let you do the hard work. But just having me be a conduit to allow everybody to be able to communicate with each other, I think is going to be huge. Because I'm guessing that you don't sit down with the economic development authorities of other municipalities too often in a face-to-face capacity, but I will be. And so if I can help share and just be that connector, I think that's going to help create some of those regional opportunities and identify the community needs that everybody has in common.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. Anybody else? Any other questions?
What do you see for the upcoming year for economic development? There's been the R word, recession, passed around, and interest rates going up. What do you foresee happening within the next year?
Yeah, I am confident that there's going to be a continued correction. I am confident that some businesses are gonna feel it, and they're gonna be directly impacted by, by the rising interest rates and just cost of goods, not being able to adjust their pricing, either due to customers or whatever, in order to account for the added inflation. The state of Minnesota in June set the record in the nation for lowest unemployment at 1.8%. That was since they first started tracking that number in 1976. We are now at about 2%. Anoka County is at 2%. I think statewide we're about 2 or 2.1. A balanced economy is typically about 3.5% unemployment. So there are far fewer people that are, looking for work than opportunities that exist. So from an individual employment perspective, what you're going to see is that there are going to be some businesses that get impacted, especially, unfortunately, small businesses oftentimes, if they're in, depending what loan structure they're in, some of that stuff adjusts on a quarterly basis. So every 3 months, their loan payment will rise or fall with interest rates. And so over the last 6 months, 9 months, that's going to be a big cost that they need to absorb. Some businesses, unfortunately, probably aren't going to make it. But those employees, so from a community stability standpoint, there are plenty of job opportunities that are out there. So I would not be surprised to see, a couple businesses in the region as a whole, not any particular municipality that I'm speaking of, but you'll start seeing some of that stuff in the news. But from a community stability standpoint, I think everybody is going to be just fine. It's going to be a slow grind. There's not going to be, I don't see anything that would make me think that there's going to be big, massive, quick, drastic changes, either like, the crash of 08 or COVID or, anything along those lines, even the .com, bust. And I'm not reading or seeing anything that would make me think we're going to be at that level. It's just going to be kind of a little bit of a slow grind. And, I'm on a workforce standpoint, I'm working with a business that is at pre-pandemic staffing. They've gotten back to where they were, but they have 45 open positions, and they can't find people for it. And so they can't grow. And so that's where you're going to get some businesses that are going to be, unfortunately, impacted by the change in the economy, but those employees are going to go elsewhere, and those businesses are then going to have an opportunity to grow and expand. And so that's why I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. So.
On that point, what do you think is the underlying reason for that? Is it the fact that the population of the state is stagnant or declining in terms of age of people who are employable? Or, I'm thinking that there's a number of different factors, but that would be one of them that comes to mind is our aging population. People are retiring, people are getting out of the workforce, and there's nobody coming in to replace them. And the exodus of younger, and I don't know what the statistics are, but I would think that there would be probably a higher incidence of egress from a younger population than the older population.
Yeah, it's a great question. If I knew the answer, I would be a bajillionaire and would be hanging out on a beach in Cabo.
You and I should work on it.
That's right. We can start a consulting business. Yeah, it's incredibly complicated. There's a number of key factors. One, in terms of aging population, aging workforce. You're absolutely right. With the pandemic, anybody that could get out of the workforce at that point did. And so if you were kind of approaching retirement and you had, you've been doing a phenomenal job at your position for however many decades, and then you had to work from home and do all the, a lot of people are just like, I'm done, close enough to retirement, and we'll call it good. This is anecdotal, so without having any statistics, but I think those that are reading the news and everything, just the overall behavior of the world these days has kind of taken a step backward in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of people in the customer service world that have exited the workforce. So I know with my business, just interactions with clients, and people are they're stressed, they're in distress. Things are hard. Things have been hard, but I've heard a lot and certainly seen a lot of people that have direct client interactions, customer interactions. There's a tremendous amount of turnover in those industries, and so I think you go to restaurants, they're short servers, number of those kinds of things, and then the entrepreneurial spirit has really caught on. There are people that were kind of tired of the rat race and said, you know what, like this is a good opportunity in order to look at something else. New business starts in 2021 were double that of 2019. So there was a lot of people that had a standard 9 to 5 and just doing their thing, and there's when things got tough, they're just like, you know what, I don't really want to go back. And so they're starting micro businesses. They're working from home. They're trying to figure things out in a different capacity. And then you get a lot of families that readjusted, that maybe were a 2-income household and they were just kind of in a groove. And then COVID came and kind of shuffled everything up, and they're like, you know what, especially I have kids at home, virtual school, all of that kind of stuff. We're going to drop down to 1 income. We're going to make changes as a family. And so you end up taking people, out of the workforce from that capacity. So you compound all of those small little things and you end up with kind of a big impact. The interesting thing for the state of Minnesota is that the workforce engagement, where a little over 68% of eligible people are actually engaged in the workforce. Nationwide average is 62. So we have a more engaged population that are, working and active. And so it's not the adage that people just don't want to work. That's not the reality. It's that I think they've made a big adjustment, and they're finding other ways in order to engage, or making adjustments from a quality of life standpoint. Said, you know what, actually we don't need 2 incomes. I'm going to focus on my family, and so I can't really fault people for making that kind of a decision. I do think that there's going to be, we're starting to see it a little bit. I don't have the set numbers, but people that left the workforce in 2020, 2021, and they're starting to trickle back. And so I think there were people that were kind of taking a pause, and then now you're going to get some of that coming back. I also think there's been a lot of emphasis on county efforts, Workforce Development Board, Career Force, and statewide, on engaging some of the older populations, and employers being flexible in their approach. Do we need everybody to be working an 8-hour day or 10-hour day? If you're an older population and you're good working 4 hours a day, okay, maybe let's hire a handful of part-timers and do 4-hour shifts. So you're getting a little bit more of that innovation and willingness on behalf of the employers in order to be able to better accommodate workforce. So it'll take time for some of that to sort out. But
So I have a question regarding preparedness and sites, and I'll admit it's been a while since I've been on the AC Red website. I know there used to be a link to available sites.
yes.
And, we've got sites that could be available, so we'd love to work with you on that to help foster that, and in terms of just getting the information out about the northern communities with the brokers. Things are starting to move our way, but still more communication. I'm guessing, are you going to be at the Mincar Expo? And awesome.
Yep.
And then just, I mean, just communicating with the brokers, I think, is super important.
Yep.
To get the site information out.
Yep, yeah, so you're absolutely right. There is that feature on the AC Red website that is, one of the key perks of the unique partnership of all 21 municipalities contributing financially to the effort, is that we as a county can have one subscription. It's not cheap, and so if you had every municipality trying to do it by themselves, that would add up really quickly, and so there's a huge value add there. So yeah, we do have, we have that available to highlight, everything that's listed by a broker, and then also any sites that are either municipally owned or that, even a private individual, if they don't have a broker engaged but want to just, kind of field some offers and handle that process themselves, then we can get that listed.
So was that link just through Mincar, is it still Xceligent, or is it, what is it?
Xceligent is one of them. This one is Catalyst,
Which is the old-
Moody's and
Yeah.
all, so, but yeah, Xceligent is one of those aggregate services as well.
Yes, and there's a new one that's free called Crexi, which would be really interesting to put on there because the brokers who don't want to pay to list their sites, put everything on Crexi. Just a thought.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have not come across that one myself yet, so I'm
Yeah,
eager to dive
check
into
it out.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, it's
I
pretty
definitely will.
interesting.
Um,
Let's see, what else? And then in terms of, how, I know a lot of counties do housing studies, but are there other kind of studies that, say, a Maxfield would do that just talk about, I mean, you stated industrial's really big.
mhm.
So I've never seen anything but like a housing demand study from Maxfield, but, are you planning on different reports for the county or for different municipalities?
It's definitely crossed my mind.
Okay.
And I have on my list, so 3 times a year we have a AC Red partner meeting, and so we pull everybody together and
Yeah.
just have a big joint conversation. And so getting all of those existing studies, because a lot of it is municipally driven,
Right.
especially on the housing study, because the type of housing that each municipality, from a policymaker perspective, that they want to see in their community, sometimes matches up with what the needs are and sometimes doesn't.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, you have this need, and the policymakers are like, yeah, that's okay. And so I feel like the perspective has been typically on, housing studies to let the municipalities drive that themselves. But yeah, hospitality studies are very common.
Right, yeah.
And you can get into industrial demand some. It gets a little bit more tricky to dial in on, kind of a municipal level. You can look at it maybe broader region, northern Anoka County we could probably take. So that could get back to one of the regionalism.
Just try to guess what we could capture as a percentage of the demand.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and it's, especially up in this area, East Bethel has done a phenomenal job of having, public water and sewer available, and that's just not the case everywhere. And so
Right.
that is a consideration, and then automatically will kind of limit what economic development from a, industrial side that you can accommodate, either through employee counts or fire suppression requirements in building code. There's a number of things that just make it cost prohibitive for some of those larger structures or larger employers if you don't have that public services.
Right.
And so that's where trying to get looking at it, regionally from this areas, you're going to be in a different opportunity class than some of your neighbors. So I'm sure somebody would be willing to take money and put together
Right.
reports for just about anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting all of that inventory of what exists out there, and then trying to see where do we have opportunities to kind of grow and find more information and see if there's, key opportunities we could capitalize on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I've got one other question. We have a situation in East Bethel where there was a facility that was created for the treatment of troubled youth.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
And I'm just curious for your position in terms of backfilling that empty building.
Yeah.
How involved is that for your area, and what strides do you think you need to do, or endeavors you need to do to make strides towards getting that facility back up?
Yeah, it definitely can be within my wheelhouse.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the fun and interesting challenge of my position, is that economic development means very different things for each municipality. And so if that is the highest priority, or one of the top priorities for the community, then I'm happy to dedicate time in order to think through that.
Mhm.
So as I said, as Jack indicated, I was a commercial broker. And so that very much is my world, and would be happy to take a closer look and either talk with, if it's, I haven't dove into it too much myself yet, but either talking with the owner or the broker or whoever's involved, being able to actually get in the facility and get a little better idea on what those nuances are, because it was built for a very specific purpose, and that makes reuse very challenging. And so, but yeah, I would be happy to, be able to think through what opportunities might exist there and see if we can help things along a little bit.
How would you go about identifying the need? Because that was built for a specific purpose, and I don't think the need has gone away.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think finding out what conversations have already been had, obviously finding a replacement organization that functions in a very similar way would be probably one of the first places that I would try. Given that it was built so recently, my assumption is that a comparable use would be still acceptable within the community. And so if that's the case, then yeah, what other organizations are out there, what opportunity is there? Because as you said, the need hasn't gone away, and especially with construction prices the way that they are, trying to build something like that yourself right now is probably going to be at least twice as much as it was a few years ago when that site was initially developed. And so the most affordable approach is going to be finding an existing facility.
right.
So
Thank you. I apologize for my phone going off, by the way.
No, that's fine.
All right. Should we talk
You
broadband
think
or?
it's twice as much, huh? I was a commercial superintendent.
Yeah.
I've never had a real job. I always worked construction. How long does it take to get structural shapes and bar joists these days? Have you heard anything at all? Because back in the day, when I was in the workforce,
Yeah.
a lot of times we would back schedule jobs from, okay, we're getting the shapes this week. That means we start digging this week. So you're not paying a superintendent to be there for nothing.
Yeah. I don't know about that particular.
You haven't heard anything at all?
Not on that individually. I do know that supply chain remains to be a big issue.
Yeah.
More so, workforce at this point. Workforce and transportation are kind of the two big things. There is a apartment complex in Anoka County that opened up recently. It was a week and a half before their grand opening, and they just received their doors, but the doors didn't have glass because that's a different supplier. So so they just were able to get all, but they didn't have any glass on any of their door, and so they're just like, just ripping their hair, but it's just kind of is what it is. And so, developers are figuring it out. But yeah, I know for industrial buildings, that's a big thing on the readiness standpoint, is finding out the information, those decisions that need to be made in order to be able to expedite that process as quick as possible, and also finding the people that are in a position that have those supplier relationships to be able to try and secure that stuff as quick as possible. But it's an issue.
The other thing that I would say, and it pertains to Northern Anoka County in general, is the fact that here, we're dealing with granular soils. So that means you can get on them earlier in the spring, and you're not dealing with mud. You can take a lot of rain. Now granted, there has been some soil correction that has had to happen for some commercial projects, but it was mostly for roads or driving pile for a sewer line and things like
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
So I mean, that is a nice thing about
Yeah.
sand. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I
Give me-
completely
give-
agree, and I think that's gonna be with that development readiness and being able to try and get some of that pre-development information sooner to be able to advertise those and be like, we did the soil borings, this is what they are. And so that you can have confidence that, no, actually this is unique, if you need to get in the ground as quick as possible, we can do that,
yeah,
you know, weeks before anybody else. And if you end up, you know, especially on materials and stuff, and labor, being able to get jobs booked earlier, you know, after frost comes out, so, yeah, I agree.
Any other questions? You good?
All right.
All right.
Should we talk broadband for a minute?
Let's talk broadband.
All right. I'll let you, if you have a primer on that, or I can dive right in, whatever's comfortable for you.
You can just dive right in. Actually, our next item is going to delve into that just a little bit more in detail. But I guess what we're looking for is, you know, some explanations on the county's ARPA grant program.
Yeah,
And that's one thing that we're really interested in. And also speak a little bit too about the fixed wireless that the county's looking at in terms of the Design 9 study.
yep,
And, you know, how's that gonna be owned? How's it gonna be managed? Is it going to be assigned to, how much is gonna be assigned to certain cities? Anything that you can just kind of update us on regarding those two items.
yeah, absolutely. So the main decisions regarding Anoka County's application for the border-to-border grant program occurred on day 2 of the job for me. So a lot of the information I know secondhand. So I'm happy to take, you know, as many questions back and be able to get any specific answers that I'm not able to field immediately. I know there's, you know, a tremendous amount of effort throughout the year leading up to that application deadline of August 4th. So the county did their own study, assessed the key areas of need. The total expense that came back as a result of that study, and their focus was fiber in the ground specifically to key underserved areas. And so I know that your study that you did looked at getting fiber in the ground for everybody, every property, every passing, being able to make that available. So this was targeting key areas, you know, these 50 houses here, this 20 houses here. How do we get fiber to those key areas around the entire county? Came back at $44 million. They were able to come up with public funds from a variety of different sources, including the state grant, to cover roughly about half of that, depending on how that was packaged. The other half was not fully accounted for and was a hopeful, you know, private contribution. But that, you know, those conversations weren't fully, you know, had, and that commitment wasn't fully made on behalf of, you know, the private industry. So the other kind of issues with the state grant program, $25 million available. You could, for any particular project that had a max of $5 million contribution, there were 133 grant applications. So we were pretty much convinced that regardless of how we structured, whether we pushed one big project, then the state would only come in at a max of $5 million, and then we still have to figure out the other $39 million, or we split it up into multiple different projects and hope that we get, you know, a significant contribution from the state. I think that based on that, it was like 17 or 18 million from the state of the 25, which was just like, just not gonna happen. There's just no way that they're gonna dedicate, 70% of their total grant funds to just Anoka County. And so the thought was, they ultimately decided to go with a fixed wireless solution. We applied for a grant for $4.5 million, and so 1/10 of the cost. That would allow for blanket coverage for the entire county using existing towers. So existing water towers, radio towers, being able to kind of double up all that. The speeds that were committed to would meet the federal requirements. I believe it was 100 down and 20 up I think is what that requirement is. And so we were provided a commitment that the fixed wireless solution would meet those requirements. Scott County did a similar thing with their fixed wireless and have had success with their program. So just given the sheer financial contribution or the financial cost of kind of the two options, and then really not having a good way if we didn't, if we stuck with the in the ground at the $44 million project cost and we didn't receive significant grant funding, then there'd be a big question on, would we be able to do anything and how do we prioritize? It didn't seem like a fair thing for us to be getting involved with. In terms of ownership and some of those questions, I'm not entirely sure. I would be happy to dive into some of that with Susan Breland, who's the Chief Information Officer for Anoka County. And she's been the one who's taken primary lead on the broadband effort, and so can certainly dive into some of that.
Greg, with those grant application numbers that you applied for, how would that apply to each individual municipality situation for the provision of that fixed wireless service? Would it be based on population, or how would that allocation be made?
My understanding is that the fixed wireless approach, that with the grant, that there would be no, it'd be countywide and there'd be no additional funds that would be required from the municipality in any capacity. That the county would be able to execute that on their own.
And do you know how the numbers or number of projects would be, say, determined for East Bethel, Ham Lake, St. Francis, now then Oak Grove, Linwood? Has there been any discussion on that level?
In terms of what projects?
Or what projects, or where's it gonna be in each municipality?
Yeah, we do have maps that I'd be happy to share that identified which towers around the county would provide that blanket coverage.
Okay. I think we have those maps. That was part of the Design 9 study.
Okay, yep.
So, yeah, that's what I was curious about, is
Yeah.
which projects would be where.
Yeah, I mean, the other big consideration was speed of implementation. So with the state funds, you needed to have fiber in the ground and lit by the end of 2025. And the fixed wireless approach, I believe that we were quoted about a 10-month implementation, 10 to 12 months. And so just being able to get something active now instead of, especially with the state, there's only so many people that are qualified to be able to trench and install the fiber and get it all over. And so if you have a big statewide program, all of those qualified people are going to be pulled in all kinds of directions. And so even if there was significant grant funds that were received, being able to get a high position on their work list to be able to get something in the ground, not in 2025, but hopefully 2023, it was just kind of a big nebulous, and we're like, you know what, people are working from home now. People are, that have kids that are still doing virtual school, homeschooling. Um, We want to get something active and available to the public and serving the public now to meet the need that is happening now, not 2025. Um, And so, and the other thing too is that there's just a tremendous amount of growth that's happening in the area. I know East Bethel has quite a bit of, economic opportunities that are in the hopper. And so you're going to get private investment that's going to jump in. And so even if, again, looking at that possible 2025 timeline, how much would the private market take care of themselves and make that, within a little bit closer financial reach and maybe reduce that need. And so there's always an opportunity, for us to implement the fixed wireless now and then still come in with fiber in a more targeted, purposeful capacity for key sites.
Has there been any information on when that notice of grant award will be made?
Unfortunately, no. The thought originally was that we were going to hear something by now, but it's been radio silent simply because of the volume of applications. They were not expecting 133. That's just, it's significantly higher than they were, that they're expecting, so it's just taking a long time. But yeah, we've tried to get information.
Would you anticipate with the number of applications that some of the awards may be less than what was applied for?
Absolutely. Yeah, significantly less.
And if that's the case, then how would those projects that were identified in that Design 9 study be addressed as far as priorities go?
The fixed wireless is going to be a replacement for anything that we would do in the ground. And so if, the theory being that we weren't going to get adequately funded for fiber in the ground, and so they just kind of abandoned that approach as the lead effort for serving, for providing service to those areas that don't have it or were underserved. So the targeted areas in the county study would be now served through the fixed wireless approach. And there would not be an immediate plan in order to come back with fiber in the ground.
Would any of this involve Zayo is probably one of the basic providers of the base?
I
Fiber
know that there's
service.
been conversations with service providers. Where those are at, I've not had enough tenure to know enough. So, yeah, with that application being due, August 4th, it was a lot of, last minute decisions when I jumped on August 1st, and then everything got submitted, and now the county's kind of in a waiting game. So there hasn't been a tremendous amount of new information that's happened since the August 4th deadline till today, outside of just bugging everybody we know at the state to see if we can get any information, and everybody's lips are sealed, so.
If they went with going with a wireless system like that, what happens with the franchise awarding to the vendors, the internet service providers for that?
My assumption is that they would have either one or a small number of providers that are selected based on proximity to, where those towers are and what some of those territories are. But in terms of what that process is, ultimately who's going to be the provider, I don't know, but I can certainly get more information on that approach.
In my experience, having a provider or vendor that kind of just wants to do it their way is fairly important. It's interesting.
Yeah. They have a tremendous amount of obvious, knowledge and expertise on ever-changing service, and I think there's also, a a public interest to make sure that everything's done properly and the level of service that is provided and those speeds that we're committed to are met, and we have an opportunity to ensure that. But
I mean, as I look at it, if it's wireless service and the fiber's already been brought to the tower and all you have to do is put your transponder on there and start signing up clients, customers, that's a pretty sweet deal.
yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why the, total financial cost is significantly less. And just the ease of implementation of, yeah, I mean, there's a handful of towers and being able to get all of that going right out of the gate,
Yeah.
is gonna be much quicker than trenching hundreds of thousands of miles around the county, zigzagging everything, so.
You're probably aware of the report that we've done here,
Yes.
the Finland report.
Yep.
We were given a very negative impression of fixed wireless and how it could be effective for the city. We don't need to go into the ins and outs of that. I guess I'm just interested to know more about Scott County, how their implementation went, what their findings are, how we could potentially learn from that.
Yeah.
Some things moving forward. Another thing I'm concerned about, and again, you don't have to answer this, it's more of a comment, but having no immediate plan to put fiber in the ground. We know these sorts of technologies, they go obsolete in a number of years. It would be good for the county to have some sort of idea of what's the next step. We know that this is kind of a cost savings measure. It's more or less temporary for a given number of years.
Yeah.
But what's the plan moving forward as this becomes an increasing necessary utility for everyone?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Quick reaction, I completely agree, and I think some of it is giving a little bit more time coming out of the pandemic and understanding what the new economy is going to be and where some of those new development trends are going to happen, to be able to ensure that we're being, very purposeful in the approach. I think that for the majority of the underserved or no service folks that are out there, households, that the fixed wireless is going to do an adequate job. You can always get faster speed, if you plug directly into the fiber highway, you can get multiple gig service, and so that's available in places, but most people, if you're running a home occupation, if you're streaming Netflix, if you're doing virtual school, that level is not necessary. And so I think this, to your point, is let's get the blanket approach in, and let's get kind of the broad need addressed, and then be able to better identify what are those key areas, what is, is there going to be increased development that maybe the private sector is going to be able to take care of on their own? Or if there's a new development area that they're bringing fiber into, that's just going to shorten that distance to the underserved area to be able to tap into, a year from now, 2 years from now. Or, what are the commercial opportunities for, new industrial attraction, commercial attraction, and being able to focus resources, narrow those in on those key development areas, as compared to needing to dilute to ensure, that you're bringing this high level of service to individual residents that aren't going to be utilizing that capacity to the same extent that a commercial operation or industrial operation might need that same level. And so I would agree that it's going to be, the approach, let's do this now, and then let's give ourselves an opportunity in order to take a step back, probably outside of the state grant process and the deadline associated with that, and really be able to take the time and identify those key areas. There are going to be additional state grant dollars in larger amounts that are coming in future years, and so I think that's also going to be part of the process of, again, let's get this first round out of the way, let's make sure we're doing something now because the need is now, and so we can take care of most of the issue, and then maybe with a little bit more understanding that in 2023, 2024, we can say, hey, we narrowed, the county's 44 million actually that's not the case. I think your study said 34 million plus or minus. Maybe in a couple of years that actually isn't what's actually needed. And maybe it's 5 million. So I think I think you're right. And I think it gives us an opportunity to see where things are at. And like cell towers, everybody a decade ago was excited about 3G and then 4G and now 5G. And so technology is going to change. And with that shorter implementation, throwing some transponders on an existing tower, hopefully in theory, as more options become available, that the private market takes over and they say, for us to stay competitive as an industry, we need to go in and swap out that equipment and be able to have that fixed wireless kind of change and improve with technology as well.
That was something that I was thinking about as you were discussing this is, as we go to the wireless option and existing fiber users see a financial advantage to go to the wireless option, and you get an influx of an unexpected number of people opting to the wireless.
Sure.
The next question that comes to mind is, will the fixed wireless be able to accommodate and adjust, on the run, so to speak? Because, as we all know, as more people sign on, the person at the end of the node is getting less and less
Sure.
bits of data available, so.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think it would be definitely a part of the consideration. And you're going to run into that issue as more development happens, that your current assessment of users for today and the amount of data that's going to be needed for today is not going to be what it is in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. My political science and business degree doesn't allow me to be a super expert in fixed wireless systems, but I'm under a possibly false impression that it might provide the opportunity to just have higher density of those transponders, radio towers. So their initial plan of, I didn't count how many that they're hoping to be able to install, 7, 8, 9, that would be able to provide that blanket coverage for the county. If they end up getting the higher demand, then you have the revenue stream to be able to financially support putting up tower 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 in order to be able to ensure that you're providing a high level of service for your users. So I think the private market has an opportunity to be able to adjust for it with a little time.
Thank you.
So with the fixed wireless, would the county administer it, or would it be handed off to a private company?
It would be handed off. They would issue the funds to help support implementation, but have somebody else manage. So if there's somebody else would be signing up subscribers. If there's an issue with it, you're calling a private company. They have the resources to be able to handle it and support it. We're not experts in that field, and we don't want to be in competition with the private market.
And so have you been in talk with private companies that are willing to take this on?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I don't know the names or the players or what any of the details behind that are, but there were conversations. Again, being able to get that commitment to know on those speeds that the 20 up, 100 down, that was achievable. They have been in conversation with the private industry to have that assurance before they decided to move forward with this approach.
Anything else?
I do think it's a bit tricky that that landscape is changing kind of faster than the county mechanisms and things for it. Like, for instance, we recently got offered, better opportunity from a company that previously wouldn't take on more people. And I have neighbors who have Midco, and I have, so all of us have a variety of things going on. And it's kind of exciting to see that change, but at the same time, I think it's creating a weird tension. It's hard to say, like you brought up, how it'll be resolved, because I just, I don't know, like, I'm glad we got onto something better than what we had access to before, but I have neighbors who have Medco, and I'm like, oh, that, I'd love to have that level too. But then the idea about trenching and all this, I don't know if my neighbors would, if enough of them would get on board for this to be feasible. So I don't know, I just think it's kind of tricky that the landscape, that the county mechanisms are a bit behind what's going on in the marketplace. And I don't know then if I don't know how the two are gonna mesh well.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a fair point. The private sector are going to make decisions on things that they can make money on.
Mm-hmm, for
And
sure.
so the question is, for the ones they can't make money on, what do you do? And sitting on the sideline is not really in anybody's interest, because especially, as you said, the economy has changed, needs have changed.
Right.
How people enjoy their evenings when they get home from work to, my kids are streaming video games and posting on YouTube. I don't know what they do. So if you have a property that is now completely out of the question, that just changes how you engage with your community and your established quality of life. And so that's where, taking on a $34 million, $44 million investment, that's hard to swallow. And to your point, will you get enough people in order to make it financially worthwhile?
Right. And then will the landscape change so much that then there's going to be sort of different needs and options and.
Yeah, and so I think, to your point, it was, let's do something now. Let's make sure that everybody is served. And then as technology changes, as the market changes, as development changes, this is not preventing any opportunity for the private market in order to continue their expansion. And with some of the additional growth that's already planned, then maybe some of those out-of-reach areas today aren't going to be out of reach later.
Right.
And so there's still that opportunity for them to catch up.
Mm-hmm.
This is, from a taxpayer perspective, if we're able to utilize state grant dollars, that just helps keep, tax levy down as much as possible within the county, and then as a result, utilizing the grant dollars, be able to hopefully have that monthly service also remain affordable. So you can call Midco or Comcast or CenturyLink or whatever, and you can say, hey, I want you to trench fiber out to my house, and they'll say, fine, I'll do it for $3.5 million. So, so everybody will do something for a price.
Right.
The challenge is that for those key areas,
Mm-hmm.
it's not financially worthwhile, and so it's kind of an appropriate step with the grant for the public funds to be able to chime in and take care of that need. And I think that's probably why things haven't happened up to that point, up until having the state grant opportunity, because it's expensive. And so I think, the county has said this is going to be the most financially efficient way for us to be able to provide that service to everybody now.
Greg, I had another question too. On the county grant that they've applied for, are there any county funds that have to match that $4.5 million, or is that 100% grant?
Yes, and I don't know what that number is, what that match amount is. There would have to be some county participation, and my understanding is that they have funds identified to meet any kind of match requirement.
And the second part of my question is if county funds are used, do they have any means or intent to try to recover any of that? Or how is that justified as an appropriate public expenditure when you're gonna be dealing with a private company that makes money off of it? The reason I ask that, that's some challenges we're running into in
Sure.
trying to participate with Midco and using city funds as part of the participation. You know, unless we can recover that cost, we've been told that that's not appropriate use of our funds if we use that to support a private business to make a profit.
Sure. Yeah, that gets into a little bit of a philosophical debate that I will just keep myself out of to some extent. My understanding is that the funds that the county have earmarked for this project, there would not be an intent for them to try and recover that in any capacity. And so I think just like any kind of, you know, municipal level incentive, whether you're talking tax incremental financing, abatement, anything along those lines, the idea of those economic development programs is that, I'm okay, thank you, that the development would not occur without some kind of public participation. If it was financially feasible for a private company to be able to do it on their own, then they would. I think the idea is, can we get public participation to the extent that it would be competitive but not given an unfair advantage?
Kind of like it'd be a but-for test like for a TIF project.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice
If
to
you
meet
do
you.
have any additional questions, please feel free to filter those through Jack, and we'll continue to have lots of conversations. And then once we get more information from the state, we'll make sure we get that to you as quick as possible.
We look forward to working with you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to item 5, broadband grant review.
Thank you, Julie. Anoka County reimbursed the city of East Bethel for the Finley Engineering Broadband Gap Analysis Report. The amount of the reimbursement was $59,000. This money came from and has been credited back to the 2022 EDA budget. This money could be used as a source of a revolving upfront fund for gap financing to assist broadband extension and upgrade programs if a way can be found to recover these funds from those served by the project. City staff has had discussions with the city attorney regarding the use of the 429 assessment process as provided by state statute to assess the city's cost to benefiting property owners. The current 429 process only allows assessment for utility burial in the right-of-way, only if all the abutting property owners petition for the improvements. City attorney is still looking into this consideration for other exceptions, but at this time it appears that assessment to recover city funds invested for gap financing will require 100% participation of all abutting property owners in the proposed area to be served. What we have now is an ISP that is willing to partner with the city to extend broadband service in unserved or underserved neighborhoods. The city has the potential to access grant funding and local matching monies to assist in these projects. But our next challenge is to find the proper way to apply the city investment and be able to recover these costs by assessment or other means. And this is the last question that I asked leading into Greg's. What we've been told is we cannot use our own monies to give to Midco to enable them to make a profit without us recovering our share of it. So that's a challenge we're facing with the local match. Now, the counties may be different. We can look at this too, and we're going to have some more discussions with the city attorney. There may be a but-for test that we can use on this to show that this wouldn't happen unless these funds were used. The only issue that we have with using the city money for initial projects is then we have no way of doing future projects unless there's some way to recover these. So that's why I wanted to have a little bit of this discussion tonight. This will probably be brought up at our next city council work meeting too. But we're wanting to get some feedback from the EDA on this. What we've done, there's 2 draft applications in your packet. We just went ahead and did. Midco helped us on these. So these will be ready to go and everybody can see what was involved in them. In the first one, it's for the Briarwood Jenkins projects, and this includes installing fiber east from the existing 181st Avenue node and serving all the properties on Briarwood Lane and those on Jenkins Street up to the end of the service from Deerwood Lane. The cost of this project is $192,400. The county grant share would be $48,075, and the city share would be the same. If the city's portion is assessed to the 30 abutting property owners over a 5-year period at 4% interest, the individual monthly cost will be approximately $29.50. So if we were able to do the assessment, then the cost for getting this internet service to these underserved or unserved areas would be essentially $1 a day for 5 years. The second application is for the 222nd Avenue Gopher Drive project. Midco recommended combining these 2 previous separate items into one. They've requested the combination. A submission of the Gopher Drive on its own would have been coax cable, but by combining them, they will be able to do fiber to the premises for both. As a result, the projected cost for the Gopher Drive were reduced, but the 222nd Avenue project increased and offset the savings of the Gopher Drive portion. The cost of this project is $190,500. Should this go forward, the county grant share would be $47,625, and the city share would be the same. If the city's portion could be assessed to the 29 abutting property owners over a 5-year period at 4% annual interest, the individual monthly cost to those benefiting would be $30.25. Midco's goal will be able to complete these projects in 2023. Due to current supply chain and inventory issues, the application requests some flexibility in the December 31st, 2023 timeline completion for this requirement. The annual operating budget required for the application is not included in that application package. Is confidential financial information that Midco does not disclose. Midco, however, is open to discuss this matter with the county if this becomes an issue. The address list in your packet for these projects may not match the numbers listed in the application as vacant lots are counted as passings to account for future service connections. If an agreement is concluded with Midco, the cost for the city-county share would be locked in and would remain unchanged for the project. As we previously discussed, Anoka County has allocated $150,000 to each of its municipalities for broadband projects with the stipulation that this money be spent by December 31st, 2023. The total cost for the 2 Midco projects that could be completed in 2023 is listed in your packet for $382,900, and this would be fiber to the premise. The amount Midco is requesting for aid to construction for these projects is $191,450, with the city share being $95,725. Currently, we have $60,000 that we could allocate to this project. If there's a shortage, while we couldn't use HRA funds specifically for this, we could do an interfund loan from the HRA to the EDA and then develop a payback plan, which would kind of correspond with the way to get that money back or increase the EDA levy to pay the HRA back. Going forward, there are 3 items to consider for tonight's discussion. If the city pursues both projects, an additional $37,725 would be needed over the $59,000 in EDA funds that could be used for our share. This would be the way we would get the additional funds. We could do an interfund loan from the HRA. The county grant funds used to support these 2 projects would have to fall under this but-for test also. We've had some discussions with the county. They haven't been able to give us a complete answer yet. But what Greg was saying tonight, it appears maybe that it's a possibility that they would be just used as grants. So that would help this project going forward. And also the city's means to recover their financial participation in the project needs to be addressed and conditional to an opinion of the city attorney could include the 429 assessment process to the benefiting property owners, a Midco repayment of city investment in the project. I did talk to Midco and asked them if they could treat this as a loan, and then they could use their revenue stream derived from this new stuff to pay us back over a period of time. They said that is not possible, but they're still looking at maybe another way or two to be able to do some reimbursement to the city. I had a call scheduled with Melissa Wolf today, but she had to be off today, so I didn't get to make that. We'll still have some discussions with her to see how that works out. And there could be some sort of a hybrid model of assessment and grants for repayment. Those are some other options we're still considering. The big thing is, from what we've found so far, is the city money we want to use now would either have to be used as a grant, or if we wanted to do an assessment, all the property owners in that project area would have to petition to have that service made. And we all know from everything, there's always, no matter how good it is, there's always probably one person that's going to say no.
Right.
So
Tom?
the other issue too is here, if the city owned the utility, if they provided the service, if they were the ISP, then we would only have to have a minimum of 35% of the property owners petition, or a good majority, whichever the city wanted to do. But since the fact that we would have no ownership in this poses the problem for use of city funds in this with a direct grant to Midco.
Same as with new roads.
Well, with new roads, it's different because we own the roads.
Yes.
But we do have a petition process for that, in which our requirement is a good majority of the petitioners must sign it.
Yep.
Which means more than 50%, but it's left up to the determination of the city council on what a good majority is. So we're trying to work to find some way to be able to leverage our funds in use with the county's grant funds to do this aid to construction with Midco on these two projects that have been presented in your packet. The first project, this is Highway 65 right here. This is 181st Lane. This is the Village Green Trailer Park. So if you come across 181st and go up, I believe this is Aberdeen Street, and then hit Briarwood Lane, it would serve all these on Briarwood Lane, all these on Jenkins Street, down to the point where the Deerwood Lane service connects to approximately this point. There'd be approximately 30 homes in this. The other project involved would be what was originally separated out as two projects to begin with. This is the Gopher Drive project. There's only 7 homes here, and they had proposed to do a coaxial cable extension, but they feel it would be better, and I agree, to do fiber to the premises for both and include this 222nd Avenue neighborhood. This is Baton Street. This is City Hall. This is 222nd Avenue, and there's approximately 30 homes in here that would benefit from this. Both of these projects are in the neighborhood of $190,000. Hopefully, though, if we can move forward this, we're going to try to attempt to renegotiate some of these prices with Midco because they are significantly higher than what was quoted to us a year ago. Now, we know that inflation and several economic factors have influenced that, but we're hoping maybe they could come down a little bit on some of their estimates. So, again, I guess I'm trying to get some feel from the EDA on what we need to do going forward, especially in the use of recovery of city costs. It's my opinion that if we want to make this thing where we can do several projects and not just two, we're going to have to wait to get some of this money back with the county's participation with their grant funds, with Midco's participation in their cost. We can probably cut the cost down to serve these areas by 75% over what it would have been with just Midco participation. And that would enable us to continue to do some of these other things. As far as the fixed wireless goes, two of these neighborhoods were in the fixed wireless thing, so, we're gonna have to maybe relook at that and see how much coverage we think we could get. The thing about Midco's is it's gonna provide much greater speeds than the fixed wireless does, and it's probably gonna be better service. We know some of the disadvantages of the fixed wireless, and even though we've seen maps that show what project areas it serves, unless there's gonna be some issues with reaching all those people because of topographical or vegetative obstruction. So this is a kind of a conundrum of a lot of things to consider moving forward. And we know there's gonna be no perfect solution, and maybe it's gonna be a combination of both. But, at this time, we have a couple projects that we could do with Midco. We have what I think is gonna be some city money to use. And I think one of the key things in doing that, if we did a grant to two neighborhoods, we're also going to be setting a precedence for some other neighborhoods. They're going to come back and say, you did it for this neighborhood, you did it for that neighborhood, we want it for ours. But the key thing is to figure out how to do this. We're working on some different aspects of it, and we will be discussing this at our November work meeting to get some further direction from City Council and their input. But I just wanted to review this with the EDA and see if you had any questions or advice or some opinions on how to proceed forward with this.
So we've got an allocation from the city now that needs to be spent by 2023.
Not from the city, we do from the
Oops,
county.
or from the county, excuse me.
That's correct.
So if we spend that allocation on the two neighborhoods, is there an anticipation that there would be other county allocations? Or is this a one and done?
This is essentially a one and done. And that's why there's a time deadline on it. That some of these American Rescue Plan Act funds
Yeah,
that
okay.
were left over, and they have to be spent with that deadline. And that's not to say they may not be extended. I think a lot of it's going to depend on how many people apply. From what I've heard, there's been very little interest from municipalities that are going to make applications to the county, because most of the cities in the southern part pretty well have the service already there.
Right.
They don't need to do this. It's only the northern 6 municipalities that are really affected and really would benefit from accessing some of this money.
Jack, I have a question about the timing. Why 5 years? It's $1 a day for 5 years. If it's 10 years, it's 50 cents a day.
It's just an example, Dan.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I would think, though, that we would want to do something to try to accelerate that turnover as much as we possibly could. So 5 years is really an example, but it would probably be a recommendation, but it could be adjusted to any number of years.
Or the option would be you could pay it in full and forego the 4%.
Yeah, and that would be one of the options. You could do the
Okay.
payoff straight up front. And in this case, like for this, it'd be like roughly $1,500–1,600.
Yep.
But for that assessment scenario, everyone would have to agree.
That's correct. There's 2 provisions under that 429 assessment state statute. One of them is for burying overhead cables, and this is where Chris says this would fit in. That would require the 100% assessment. It does issue, this is broadband projects are eligible to do 429 assessment. But the scenario set up in the state statute is that the city is the ISP. So, and that's one thing that we do not want to be.
Right. Well, and how realistic is it that everyone's going to agree? Should we even be discussing that option?
Yeah, and you're probably gonna run into a situation where there's, let's say there's 30 homes, you may have 10 of them says, I don't want internet, I've got my cell phone,
Right.
I can do everything on that. I can do it from Wi-Fi. So, that's gonna be a challenge, and our city attorney is still looking into this to see if there
Okay.
are some other exceptions that we can utilize on this, if that's an option.
I know that back in the old days, that it was even before I was on the council. The city had, I want to say, had paved Sportsman's Lane and had assessed the property owners, and they had there were more that wanted it, that didn't want it. And I'm just curious if this 429 process, if the same thing applies there insofar as the fact that the way I recall it was that if the cost of the project was added onto your property, was balanced against it, you had to have, basically, your property had to increase by more, the property value had to increase by more than what the cost of the project was.
That's absolutely correct.
And is that still the situation with this?
Sure would be.
Okay.
So in this instance, you would have to prove, and I've talked to an appraiser who's going to get us some information on that. I haven't engaged him yet until we see what goes, but he says certainly that this service is going to add more than $1,600 to the property value. But we would have to show that, we would have to have a certified appraiser come up with that figure and justify that. But that's one thing, that's still a condition you have to meet. Is the assessment has to be less than what the increase in, or what the property value. It's gonna add that value to the property or more.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah, we're
these all be
talking
red?
apples and apples. I could see where that could happen insofar as, I mean, back in the old days, there was a lot of sand roads in East Bethel. And they were tough. I mean, we couldn't, in the spring, we had to park down on the county road. We couldn't get down Quincy and carry the groceries in when the frost left the ground. Things have changed, obviously. I don't know, this is kind of a sticky wicket. One of the things, again, I can't remember the exact formula that we worked out, was that there was a way that, not wanting to encourage excessive residential development, so to speak, that if someone wanted to develop a 40 and there was someone, or make a development, and someone had a large piece of ground that was part of that, and they weren't gonna necessarily oppose it, but they also didn't want to develop, we deferred, and I can't remember the formula that was used, and the way that the payment was deferred for the passing that happened was that the longer that they resisted cutting up their 40 or their 10 or whatever they had, the less they were gonna end up having to pay for the road when they finally did cut their property up, if the road benefited their property. Am I making sense to you?
And that's essentially the way it still currently is, but on the road project in that case, the 140 would get one assessment. But if that were further subdivided, then it would be split out for additional assessment for each lot.
Yeah. I don't know, I just look at this as I don't think that a decision can be made on this from my standpoint. I think that you still have to, number one, see if you could get a very persuasive person in every neighborhood
Well,
to go around and have a ironclad agreement.
Well, and that's what it takes, and there's 2 or 3 hearings that have to happen in this process too.
And if,
Number one, you would have to receive the petitions from the residents in the neighborhood. The city would look at that and evaluate, number one, at a minimum, is there a majority that want this? And in the city's case, there is no set number, it's defined as a good majority.
yeah,
So it can be, that could be a moving target. And then after that, everybody is given a estimate of what the cost would be, and then there would be a hearing, and then the residents would come and speak and say, this is something we want to move forward with. Then there would be a bid on it. In this case, there probably wouldn't be a bid because we're only working with one, but on the roads, there's a bid. once the bid comes in, there's another hearing to determine if they
Oh, yeah.
can proceed with it.
Yeah. I remember, well, I'm not gonna use the name, I'll just say it's a Oak Grove City Council candidate that has a very prominent face on his signs, who used to be a City of East Bethel employee. And he had his shape and, he was always pushing shape and pay projects. And again, it's putting the cart before the horse. And it was just too aggressive and,
And, you know, there's a lot of similarities between the two processes. This one's a little bit different, in that you're essentially only gonna be working with one contractor.
yeah.
And it's mainly just a question is, do the residents want the service? And if they do, here's what the cost is, then you have a chance to come before the city council and say, okay, even now, we got the cost, we want it or we don't want it. Yeah, and to me, this wouldn't be, now, the city can go in and do 429 assessments without any petition, but I don't look for us to do that. I mean, I just don't think that's the way to do it, and I don't think the council wants to do it that way either. But at least this gives the residents a choice of whether they want it or not, as far as the majority goes, or whatever number is said as a supermajority.
I think a tricky thing is, I live in one of these areas, so my house is on here.
Yeah,
And I have a neighbor who's probably on the same map with me. Midco came in, they asked him if they wanted it, they and a handful of their neighbors were offered it, and they were told they were going to pay a fee, but Midco never charged them this fee. I don't know if the other neighbors ever got charged the fee or not. I only have the knowledge of my friend, and they were never asked to pay the fee. And so then, but they have continued and enjoyed and used the service and whatever, and they were glad to have gotten it. They had one neighbor who declined it, wound up saying no. I think because they felt they were gonna be charged those few $1,000s, which I don't know if all the neighbors never got charged that or just my friend, I'm not sure. But then it's hard to know that Midco came in and did this for their benefit, didn't charge them that upfront fee at all. And, you know, and then and they are connected. There's a more dense neighborhood behind them. So they're connected to that neighborhood, which there were homes already hooking up there and whatever. So it might have just been kind of a mutual benefit thing, but they were told initially, you're gonna pay this fee, and then Midco never asked for it. So then it's hard to know too, then, I don't know if other neighbors have this knowledge, maybe they don't, but, you know, it's hard to, I mean, Midco's gonna get the service likely for a long time if the people choose to continue it, but there are other options too. So, and there are other options coming in all the time that aren't available.
And in terms of other options, in particular, this neighborhood is one that's identified in that county study.
Mhm.
So, you know, if they're identified in there and they're going to get fixed wireless, and all they gotta do
Right.
is subscribe, do they want to participate in a city project with Midco where it's gonna get fiber and you're gonna
Right.
be assessed for a portion of the cost?
Right. And some of my neighbors approached Midco a long time ago and were given such astronomical numbers that they got really angry with Midco. They felt like it was we don't want to do it price. So, and it really soured them. So
Well,
whether or not they, you know,
yeah, you know, in this case, you know, what they're gonna do is they're gonna bring service along 181st here, and this is Davenport. This is where the city entrance sign is. This is a stop sign up here. This is 65 Pub and Grub. And then bring it up Briarwood, and there's a lot of area in there that doesn't have any current users. However, they do count the properties that it would serve. So if it serves 40 acres in through here, that's charged to passing. So that vacant property would be assessed also. And then you get down on here into Jenkins Street, going toward Deerwood, and you get into the denser development. So There is, and even going forward, there was 2 or 3 people that we talked to at the end of Briarwood Lane. Back up in this area, there's maybe 3 or 4 houses on this road that had very poor or no service, and they were actually included in this portion of the project. So it's not an easy thing to kind of get out of the weeds on this one, to kind of come up with something where we're going to do. But, you know, I think while we have the opportunity and there's some grant funds here, it's something we need to explore. And maybe it's not something we do now. Maybe we do go with a fixed wireless first and then wait for the fiber to come. But that's something that's going to have to be decided on within the next 2 or 3 months, because this time deadline for the expiration of the $150,000 grant funds is going to run out unless it's extended, so.
Could we use the grant funds to, I don't know a lot about the fixed wireless system, but I assume it's on top of, it'll be transmitted from the cell towers and water towers, et cetera. Can we use those grant funds to add additional transponders to different areas to make it more effective?
That's a probability that we can discuss with Greg now that they're going with this project. Of course, the other assumption is that the county's going to get the money. And
Right.
with 130 applications, I suspect if they get funded, it's probably going to be for a significant amount less. So if they do that and they're looking at 6
Come back.
municipalities to do this, who's going to get left out? That's the other question.
Right.
So it would be very helpful at this point to know what the county was going to receive and what areas they were going to actually serve. So that's something else we may have to keep an eye on right up to the last minute too.
So the businesses right now on the east side of the highway, north of Briarwood, Route 65, et cetera, going north up to the future Quick Trip store, none of them are on coax or fiber at all. They're on, are they on coax, do you know?
I'm not sure exactly what the delivery means is, but they all have, they all claim to have adequate internet service.
Isn't that piece of property that lays northwest of Briarwood, that is owned by the 2 gentlemen from Ham Lake, isn't that zoned for a higher density residential, or am I mistaken?
This is in that mixed use area, so there could be a.
That's mixed use?
Yes.
Okay.
So there could be.
I mean, it's frustrating to be taking and putting infrastructure in place that in my mind should be being put in place by a private entity and then have them be able to come in and reap the benefits. My comment about the fixed wireless being a sweet deal for whoever picks up that franchise, I'll stand by that comment.
Well, and that's the issue with the use of city funds in this. Is,
Yeah.
you know, we were told we cannot, it's not an appropriate expenditure of public funds to give this to a private entity for them to make a profit on. So in that case, you know, we would have to have partial ownership of it to justify it.
I mean, I understand investing to get investment, you know, but I don't know.
But when it's public funds, though, we can invest to get investment if we own it. But if we invest with a private corporation or company and we have no stake in it, then it's not considered an appropriate use of funds.
Right.
So,
I agree with Brian that the stickiest point is the assessment part of it. This could really fall apart based on that. I have 2 questions though. First of which is, for both these projects, we're talking just about residences, right? We're not talking about any business, any
Correct.
established businesses. Okay, the second question I have is, Midco repayment is city investment in the project. How would that happen? Can you explain that a
Well,
little bit more?
what I discussed or brought up to Midco was they could treat the city's portion as a loan to Midco, and then Midco could repay that loan once they started providing service here from the revenue that they generate from the new service.
Well, what if they defaulted or something? What if they did something we didn't expect?
Well, there would have to be provisions in the contract drawn up to address that, but Midco said they couldn't do the loan type deal, so that's kind of a moot point, but it was something I thought was maybe interesting to consider, but this would be to show that we're gonna get our portion of the money back. And not because we essentially want the money, but because, number one, we don't want to set a precedent that we can't follow up on, and number two, then this would be a way to keep turning those monies over maybe to do other projects.
Yeah.
The fairness idea was interesting, and I did some digging myself to try to understand, like, if, with my friend not winding up being assessed, was there some reason Midco didn't assess them or didn't charge them this fee? And I wound up finding a lot of information about how Midco gets a lot of funding from federal sources and all this, and it made me wonder if they could do what they were trying to do, if maybe they ran into a hiccup and felt there was some reason they weren't supposed to do that, and that's why they didn't do it. I wasn't sure I found the answer. I didn't find the answer, but except that I did find a lot of information that Midco gets a lot of funding from like federal sources and all that kind of stuff, so it doesn't make it that easy for them to just do these things. I mean, and, you know, I mean, they're not supposed to fund this stuff with people, I think, so.
No, it has this question, has many facets. It's not just a single question, you know,
Right.
there's many sides to this coin. It's not two-sided, so there's a lot of things we have to work through, and that's why I wanted to bring this up as some discussion points and get some ideas. And, you know, again, if this area right here is on their fixed wireless program,
Right.
and they can get it done in 2025, maybe that's the way to go.
Yeah, because number one, we don't know what the amount of the county allocation will be, what they're going to get. If it gets to a certain point of no return where it doesn't even make sense to do it, then, I mean, I don't know what the answer is.
And then the other thing is, let's say the county doesn't get the grant, which is always a distinct possibility too. Then that offer of the fixed wireless program to serve this area is gone, and now we're back to square one.
Exactly.
And we've given
Now we're
up our
past our
opportunities to get the money, so
Deadline for the grant.
it's something we're gonna stay on top of, but it's a conundrum in a lot of situations, because, you know, until we really know what the county's gonna
Right.
get in terms of this grant, then we're kind of at a loss on what our position or stance is gonna be recommended to be too.
So I don't think we can make a recommendation.
Well,
Right,
I think the fact that we've had this discussion and recognize all the potential problems that we're facing here is a starting point.
Okay.
And I'm perfectly comfortable with that. There are two city council persons in the audience and one sitting here that have had access to this discussion and can relay some of this back to our work meeting group, and we'll just go from there.
Jack, were you provided with the map of what the fixed wireless
That-
coverage would be?
That was in our last packet that we showed, really in our work meeting too. We have those maps, and those will be shown at the work meeting.
Okay.
I don't know how long it's going to spend. I can bring them up.
No, that's fine.
And again, I've got a little, I'm not gonna say experience, I got a little contact in that business. And that technology is changing so fast. At one time, the city of Minneapolis, they needed to have a transponder about every 3 square blocks, something like that. I mean, and obviously that doesn't work out here. Granted, you got more density down there eating up bandwidths, but it's really changing. So, who knows?
All right, so we don't have a recommendation or motion, so we'll other questions or comments from anybody? Okay, good discussion. No answers, but we'll.
Well,
just-
you know, I think we're coming closer to defining all the issues that we
Right.
need to address, and I think the key thing now is to hopefully get some information, or hopefully Deed gives notice of the grant awards, so we'll know exactly where some of these stands. It may have been served by some of the fixed wireless stuff, and if it does, I think maybe that's the way to go at this point.
Yeah,
And if not, then we'll see what we can delve into to maybe make up that difference if they're not gonna be provided service there.
fair enough. All right, so shall we move on to item number 6, business activity review?
Thank you, Julie. The Eldridge East Bethel Second Edition, we have been working frantically with Elevage to get all the information they want to file and go to the planning commission for their preliminary plat in October. They updated a marketing study to determine the best type of residential use of the property. The preliminary plat planned unit development amendment for a 2,212 unit townhome development was submitted to the city. A public hearing will be held at the October 25th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. And this will be forwarded to City Council on November the 14th or the 28th. Depends on how many items need to be cleaned up as conditions for the preliminary plat. So this will be held at the Planning Commission at the first stage on October the 25th for the preliminary plat. And again, this will be 212 units, possibly reduced to 196. The interesting thing about this is the density of this, while it seems extremely high, is not much higher than the traditional quarter-acre lot residential subdivisions. It's just a little less than one home per acre higher than that. And that's because there's gonna be a lot of open space
Sure.
associated with this, so. If you're interested in finding out that, tune into the planning commission on the 25th, and, we'll probably have, some more discussion on this too at our EDA meeting in November. Hidden Pines is a 10-lot rural residential development that has been submitted for review to the city. The concept plan public hearing will also be held at the October 25th, 2022 Planning Commission and could be forwarded to City Council on November 14th, 2022 for action. The Stone Group Second Edition, which we approved and discussed previously. It's a final plat for 5 commercial lots, was approved by City Council on September the 26th, 2022. This is at the intersection of 209th and Highway 65. And staff has received 2 inquiries by 2 interested businesses, both of which probably do not qualify for the zoning for this, but there is some interest starting to develop in this area. The Washi Commercial Finishes at 21335 Aberdeen Street. They applied for conditional use permit to construct an additional 7,200 square feet. The expansion did require the CUP, and the City Council approved this on September the 12th, and the owner will start construction probably in the spring of 2023. They do run a nice business there, and it's still very attractive. They actually got in there and cleared a little bit of land for some fencing. The Holiday Station Store Site Plan Review. The existing speedway will be demolished and a new Holiday Station store constructed at 1341 187th Lane Northeast. This project will be the same footprint as the new Holiday store in Ham Lake on Crosstown and Highway 65. Site plan was approved by City Council on September the 12th, and the demo and new construction should start by the end of this year.
So question on the townhomes in item number 1, are those for sale townhomes?
They can be, but they're gonna start out as rental units. That's
Okay.
what the developer said the market study showed.
Hmm.
But they will be available for sale. I'm not sure if they will be for the inception, but I'm sure that that's part of his marketing plan.
What's the location of that?
That's the Elvidge project. It's just gonna be north of Quick Trip, between Quick Trip and the golf course on the
Okay.
east side of Highway 65.
Were there
Probably-
single-family homes that are no longer part of that project?
There were in the original proposal, but a lot of that's changed because of the pending purchase agreement.
Okay,
The golf course may be sold. The golf course was one of the amenities that would be available to those homes. They thought would add extra market value to them. But since the fact that, from what we've heard, Viking Meadows will not reopen as a golf course in the spring of 2023, that changed a lot of the site plan and a lot of the types of housing that could be marketed there.
so is that a higher density than originally was planned totally?
Yes, it is. Originally, I think there were like 140 units in there, which was a mix of kind of single-family, some townhomes. And there was a 3-story, like about a 40-unit senior housing project that was planned or proposed to be in there. But that was the original concept plan, but that's changed with several things that have happened in the economy and with some of the local changes in land use around that property.
The original plan also called for a grocery store in that.
This still includes a commercial component,
Okay,
so that's still on the plan for
Okay.
the new development.
all right, thank you.
In item number 3, the Stone Group lots, so those are not are or are not served by city water and sewer.
They are not.
Hmm.
But as part of any development there, they will have to install those stubs from their building out to the street so they can be connected when utilities are provided there in the future.
Okay.
Will they initially come in with septic then?
They'll initially come in with septic and well.
Okay.
And a lot of times, some of these commercial activities can survive on that for a long time. But eventually, at some point, there will probably be utilities extended from Sims Road down in that direction to service
Yeah.
that area.
You'd think it would limit the use, I mean, any medical user or anything, that'd be tough. Okay. All right. Anything else?
That's all I have.
All right. So item number 7. EDA member resignation. Mr. Butler?
And
Miss-
I would
Mr.
like-
Butler is,
I would like to read this one, and
okay,
Dan Butler has served on the City of East Bethel Economic Development Authority since February 2012 and submitted his resignation from EDA effective October 18th, 2022. Mr. Butler has served with great distinction in this position, and his leadership, business knowledge, and enthusiastic personality will be greatly missed. We wish Mr. Butler the best in his future endeavors and thank him for his countless contributions to the city and East Bethel EDA. And from my personal standpoint, Dan, it's been a great pleasure and honor to have served with you, and it's something that I will remember the rest of my life. And thank you, my friend.
wow, thanks, Jack, appreciate it.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
your service over the years as president, vice president, member. It's been great.
Well, when one door closes, another one opens,
Yeah.
so. There'll probably be somebody there that's just gonna take this chair and be the next president.
Yes.
Incidentally, we have some Kleenex up here if anybody.
Yeah.
Strange coincidence with the timing of the wild season starting.
They're losing 3-2. Not that I know.
Oh, well, really sincere
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you. Yes, it's been just wonderful working with you. Wish you the best.
Thank you, appreciate all the kind sentiments, thanks.
I would like to add one more thing. I did send Dan an email, asking if he may be available to come to a city council meeting on the 24th or the 14th of October. And I did promise him.
November?
November,
You said October.
I'm sorry, date's already passed. But I did promise him though, if he could come, we would get him out of there so he could go home and watch the rest of the Wild game.
I'll do my level-headed best to make one of those numbers.
Thank you, Dan.
You bet.
Will you let us know which date that is?
I will, I certainly will.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, well, with that, item number 8, city council report.
Good evening, everybody. In the time since we've last met together, council has set the preliminary budget and levy for 2023. The final will be set in December.
What's the preliminary at?
The preliminary is at 0.09, I believe, of an increase. So it is 0.9. Yeah, so it's pretty incredible when the sheriff's contract came in 8% above what we were expecting.
Right.
8%.
8%.
What's the total city budget?
The actual number,
At this point in time, projected?
6.2 million,
Pardon?
6.2 million.
Okay.
so we're.
I remember voting for the first $1 million budget. Things have changed.
Yeah, so we had many discussions on how to keep this budget next levy low as comparison, and that's what we continue to do every year. We have a new fire chief with the retirement of Mark Ducharme. Rodney Snell was selected of a very good group of individuals, from my understanding. He's a veteran of the East Bethel Fire Department, lives in East Bethel, and is committed to East Bethel. So it's sad to see Mark Ducharme go, but I believe that we are in good hands with Rodney Snow. We held the public hearing and passed an ordinance regulating the sale of THC products. They'll be regulated similar to tobacco and alcohol. We were able to do this very quickly with the aid of our city attorney, where a lot of cities were passing moratoriums, thank you. The word slipped my mind. I knew it started with an M. East Bethel was able to actually draft new ordinance and get it passed before some cities even reacted. So, upcoming, we're in the election season. We had to meet the candidates on October 12th. If you missed that, you can watch that on East Bethel's YouTube site. The bios are also in the last city newsletter that came out, and they are also on East Bethel's website. And with the election, some election precincts have changed. I believe it is precinct number 2, where traditionally it was at Our Savior's Church. It will now be at East Bethel Elementary. I believe that there is a scheduling conflict, and that's why the location changed. So double check your voting locations depending on where you are, and hopefully you get to the right place.
Actually, the primary was at East Bethel and Cedar Creek Elementary Schools, but the general election will be back at Our Savior's.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason was Our Savior's had their vacation Bible school scheduled for the primary date, and that's why we had to move it to the elementary.
Okay, so just disregard what I said and go to your normal place. Thank you, Jack. November 16th, we have our fall town hall meeting that will be between the senior center and the council chambers. That will start at 6 o'clock for a meet and greet with all of our city council members and mayor. There will also be city employees there from various departments, and oftentimes the sheriff's department shows up, MnDOT shows up, a handful of other groups. So come out, have some cookies, some coffee, juice, ice water, and be informed about stuff. That is my report. If there's any questions or comments?
Anyone?
No? All right, well, I'd just take this moment to thank Dan for his service. I think he's served here longer than I have, and I think I started around 2011, and you've always been an inspiring source and a source of guidance for getting involved and being involved. You've always encouraged that. And so I think that for you and the city will absolutely miss you.
Thanks, Brian. You bet.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Well, and we're gonna miss you.
I know.
And I don't want to run this into the ground, but I'd like to make one more comment about Mr. Butler. One of my favorite shows that I've ever watched was a HBO series called Lonesome Dove. And it was a Western that was broadcast back in the early 90s. And it had a great cast. It had Tommy Lee Jones, and it had Robert Duvall. And they were paying tribute to one of their own, and the tribute was cheerful in all weathers, never shirked a chore, splendid behavior. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome, Jack. I just want to say it's been a interesting journey. We moved here in '97. And for those of you who don't know, I had some serious health issues. They were so serious that when the EMTs showed up, Mark showed up with the EMTs. It's like, that's Dan Butler's address. So the chief of the fire department shows up, and so I was in some serious dire straits health-wise. To the point that there weren't any ICU beds. And I had to wait in the trauma center at Mercy for 12 hours to get to Abbott to the ICU beds. Finally got out of Abbott after they've discovered I had sepsis. I had a bacteria called Fusobacterium, and one of the infectious disease persons walked into the ICU room and said, "We figured out what's wrong with you. You have Fusobacterium." And I'm like, well, what the heck is that? But the good news is, well, that was the bad news. The good news is, what we've been treating you with all of the, I got 19 things running into my arms. We're treating that right off the bat. So I finally got home. I had abscess on my liver. I had my liver drain in for 3 or 4 weeks and all this other stuff going on. And I had a PICC line in my arm, and my wife is giving me an injection twice a day with a horse syringe that's this long, and it takes her 5 minutes to put it in because you can't just shoot it all in. So anyhow, my son runs our business, and my wife's at Abbott, and the dog's at home, and there's all of this going on in the background. And I finally get home, and she said, "I think we need to move closer to Bill. He's our only son." I'm like, "No, I'm not leaving East Bethel. Are you kidding?" There's no way I'm leaving East Bethel. And she said, "Well, okay." And I thought, you selfish SOB. If she needs to go, I'll go too. So that's the story. I'm going to miss you guys from the bottom of my heart. I've got a lot of time and effort and
heart and soul in the city of East Bethel. Excuse me, I'm getting a little emotional
Yeah.
or so, but anyway. So, we're moving. And I will be back. I am told by my golf committee team that because we've raised $7,000 this year, the new goal is to get to 10. So they've implored me to continue to run the golf committee team to see if we can get to the $10,000 goal and put that money back into the community. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I miss you. Wow, how do we follow that? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I think Mr. Butler should do that.
Yes.
I don't want to adjourn. That means it's over. So I'm voting no. I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We're adjourned.